Hey everybody, it's Casey McLean and this is Comedians in Quarantine. Today's guest is Rachel Mack. She's a comedian in Los Angeles, and I first saw Rachel on a clip that was posted to Instagram from a Don't Tell comedy show. By the way, go check those out, Don't Tell Comedy. They'll put shows on in your city, in a lot of cities across the country, where you buy tickets but you don't know the lineup, you don't even know the location until the day of. They email it to you and you go to the shows. Really great. I'll link to the clip in the show notes on the podcast, or maybe, I don't know, this will be on YouTube too in some form, but we'll see. I don't know exactly how to link on there. Really funny. And then my wife and I this morning watched her Lights Out with David Spade, and it connected. My wife is a middle school English teacher, and I watched it alone, and I was laughing on our porch, and I was like, I woke my wife up on accident to show her this clip. She was still asleep. I didn't realize she was still asleep. And then the first thing we did when she woke up is watch this clip, and we were dying laughing. So funny. Rachel also, like 2 weeks ago, not even 2 weeks ago as I record this, had her first child, which right now is an absolutely insane time to be having a child. Obviously, nobody would have known this was going to happen leading up to making the decision to have a child, but it's just an absolutely insane time to have a child, and she talks about that a lot on this podcast. She has a podcast coming out called The McBlakes Have a Baby, or Having a Baby. When it comes out, I'll retweet it, link to it, all that stuff, and talk about it in the intro. And you can follow her on Instagram at Your Rachel Mack. I promise you will not be disappointed. Very funny stand-up clips. Go check her out on YouTube. Also, just type in Rachel Mack Comedian is how I got to her. And Rachel Mack Comedy is her website. Thank you for listening to this podcast. And if you want future stand-up dates of mine, they are at thecaseyMcLean.com/calendar. And I actually finally have a date to promote, and I'm so excited about it. I've resisted doing these virtual shows this whole time. I haven't done an open mic, one of these like virtual open mics. I've not done stand-up since March 11th. It's been almost the longest I've gone without doing stand-up since I started was last year when my wife and I had our child, and I went 45 days without doing stand-up. Like 30-ish days before, and then after she had her, my plan was to do 30 days after, and then I finally had some inspiration and wrote a couple jokes, and I went to an open mic that was like walking distance from my house. And so I got to do a couple of those before the show, but on May 2nd, I am hosting a show. You can find tickets at benefitcomedy.com. The lineup is absolutely fucking insane. It's a lineup that I could never host in Washington State because it's got 6 headliners on it and me. It's got Chris Frangiola, Josh Wolf, Caroline Ray, Dave Landau, Andy Woodhull, and oh my god, and John Roy. Those are 6 separate headliners. Maybe in LA or New York could a lineup like that exist, but in Washington State, it's just, there's no reason for 6 headliners to be on the same show. And now I'll be hosting this show from the privacy of this very room. This backdrop right here that you see if you're watching the YouTube video is what I'll be performing in front of, unless I clean up what's behind that backdrop, and then I'll be performing in front of a wall, a vaulted ceiling. We'll see. Anyway, check that out, benefitcomedy.com. Tickets are $10. Everybody that's in your house can sit on your couch and watch it. It's going to be so fun to be back doing stand-up. There will be audience laughing, by the way, that was my criteria. If I'm going to do a live show, I need to hear the audience laughing because I have low self-esteem and I need feedback. And it actually makes the feeling of writing jokes not seem so futile. So please enjoy this podcast with Rachel Mack. She was great. I feel very lucky that I got to have her on the podcast so quickly after her giving birth. And yeah, enjoy. Thank you for listening, and stay safe and stay in shelter.
Hello.
Hi, Rachel. It's Casey.
Hi, Casey. Let me get my headphones on real quick.
Sure.
Okay, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm recording already. Just so you know, I normally it's not a problem, but I did have a journalist yell at me one time.
um, I'm totally fine with that.
All right. Uh, so I'm actually I want to I read the Week in a Comedian's Life uh piece that you wrote
Mm-hmm.
after losing your job. And so I'm going
Yeah,
to ask you some questions that are specifically related to that. And
sure.
I'm a little worried it's going to be. I have a friend that listens to this podcast, and but he's behind on it, and then he'll like live text me while he's listening to it, as though like I'm having a conversation in front of him,
Uh-huh.
and he'll like reference something that somebody else said 4 weeks. What I'm saying is I apologize in advance if I'm asking annoying questions because of that thing. But first off, you had a baby recently
I did. I had a baby on the 8th. Mm-hmm.
on April 8th.
April 8th. Yeah.
Wow. When was your last when was the last set that you did?
I think it was March 9th.
Okay.
It was I remember I things were getting crazy on like a Thursday. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And then I had spots at the Comedy Store that weekend, and my husband was like, "You really should not go to the Comedy Store. There's
Yeah.
so many tourists there." Um, and also comedians who he's like, they could have symptoms and still want to do sets. And I was like, you know what? That's fair. That is fair. So I canceled my spots at the store, which was really hard for me to do.
Mhm.
But then it wasn't just a few days after that that the store closed down itself.
Right. So
So
yeah, my last set was March 11th, which was a Wednesday,
the
and
Wednesday before, yeah.
yeah, and I had so it was like, I mean, it's a similar situation where it's like, yes, these are monsters that are coming and performing on these shows, many of them. And also it was at the Comedy Underground in Seattle, which, have you ever been to Seattle? I actually took that for granted when
Years ago,
oh,
like 4 years ago.
gotcha. So the Comedy Underground, they do like their open mic on Monday, and then they do this like they call it callbacks, but it's like many comics on that show also on Tuesday, and then it's only like 6 comics on the show on Wednesday,
Hmm.
but there were 65 people or something like that that touched that same microphone the 2 days before that.
Yeah.
And I thought
Yikes.
about that day, and it's so crazy how quickly it progressed, because on Sunday I did a show and I gave every comic on the show a hug.
Hmm.
And then on Wednesday, we were like elbow bumping going on to stage.
Sure.
And then comedy was over. I got offered a show in a town it's like a 4 hour drive from here, because Todd Barry canceled, which I'm certainly not on the level of Todd
Wow.
Barry. But
Yeah.
I got offered this show, and it was actually the first show that I turned down. And they went through with the show as far as I understand, but I was like,
Huh.
my mom has like risk factors, and actually I don't know how much time you spend with the data, but it's we have an 8-month-old daughter,
Hmm.
and there's been, I believe, 0 cases reported worldwide, 0 deaths reported worldwide of children under 9 years old.
That is just not true, though.
You don't think it's true that the kids haven't died, or just haven't been reported?
Well, I heard on Democracy Now, which is where I get my news, with
Sure.
Amy Goodman, and there was a case where an infant died in Illinois and in one, and I believe somewhere on the East Coast, I think Connecticut.
Well, now you've introduced anxiety that I've been ignoring for this
I
entire.
mean, because I thought we were in the clear too, because everyone was saying kids aren't getting it, kids aren't getting it, and then yeah, these two cases popped up like the week or two before, I guess the week before everything went crazy.
Interesting. Well, I'll have to re-examine the data and maybe listen to that podcast and see where they're getting it from, because I've been this has been allowing me to sleep every night, is the idea that
Uh-huh.
my daughter is not at risk, and now you've launched me into a fit of insomnia, I think.
You know, we also, yeah, I should double check because I just I have a nurse friend and she's doing like a study on it, and she said I don't know if she's studying a certain number of cases, but she said in her study there have been no children
Sure.
whatsoever that have even gotten it. So who knows?
My friend works at a my friend's wife works at Seattle Children's Hospital, which
Mm,
is like it's all immunocompromised kids basically,
mm,
and they haven't had any cases or deaths as a result of it, which is good, because I mean they're facing pretty dire circumstances there all the time.
yeah,
But what kind
high
of stress
risk.
did you have? How was you train? Oh, you just answered a question in the background.
Uh,
I was going to ask you if you
that
got a
was my
dog,
dog. Yeah.
because
Ozzy, you're
one
gonna come in this room.
one of the questions I had from that blog is that you were meeting with a friend of your husband's that was fostering a dog.
Oh yeah, Pebbles.
Pebbles. Is this Pebbles? Did I just hear
This
Pebbles?
is not Pebbles. This is Ozzy, who's probably louder than Pebbles, but way cuter than Pebbles.
Pebbles was an ugly ass dog.
Uh, she's just shaggier. Ozzy's very fluffy. He looks like if you were to draw a cartoon of a dog, you would draw Ozzy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, and you did not name it. This is so two things happened this morning. I read that blog post in preparation for this, and then I showed my
hmm
wife your Lights Out with David Spade. Is Lights Out is the name of the show?
hmm
And my wife is a middle school English teacher,
Oh wow.
and so she was like losing her mind. It was very. I mean, it's such funny material. Uh,
Oh, thank you.
yeah, and then we were talking. So our dog is named Lainey after Elaine Bennis from Seinfeld,
Mm.
and actually her full name is Elaine Bennis.
That's fun.
And yeah, you were gonna name a dog Carmela, but it didn't happen, or Corrado, I believe.
Oh yeah, Corrado. Well, yeah, I do love those names for a dog, but yeah, he just came with the name Ozzy, and we felt like it fit him, so we let him keep his name.
I see. How
hmm
stressed were you? How much preparation did you do in advance of giving birth, and then how much different was it from what you expected because of all of the COVID-19 concerns?
Well, my water broke 2 months early, so I thought I would have more time
Mm-hmm.
to prepare. I hadn't really thought about labor or the delivery at all because I was like, this is so far out.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I'm doing nothing every day. So I have lots of time to get prepared. Um, and then my water broke, I guess it was 2 weeks ago today. Yeah, 2 weeks ago today. And first of all, I didn't even know that could happen, that your water could just break early.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was convinced that they would like plug me up and I would go back home. And then they were like, no, you're staying here until the baby comes. And I'm like, what the hell? Uh, so yeah, I was like hoping because my due date was June 3rd, and I was like, maybe by June 3rd, a lot of the craziness will be over. We're only in LA, I think shelter in place is currently until May 15th.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, who knows? Things could be relatively normal by then. But they weren't. They weren't relatively normal at all for me.
Yeah. So
Uh,
did I've
yeah.
heard stories about like the fathers of children are like very restricted their access to the room and to the hospital.
Yeah. So the day we got there, actually, they're like, as of today, your husband's only allowed in for 2 hours a day.
Oh my god.
And my husband was like, talk to someone in charge here. And so we brought in like the manager of the nursing staff or something like that. And my husband, thank God he was willing to advocate because I was also I was not necessarily in a place to be reasonable
Mm-hmm.
or like think things through. But my husband was like, the main problem that you have is like in and out. So he's like, what if I just promise to stay here? And
Mm.
they're like, okay, but you can't even go into the hallway.
Oh.
So he was there with me for 3 days through the delivery. But then I developed like some weird symptoms. They like put me on drugs to kind of speed up the baby's development since I was early,
Mm-hmm.
but my body did not react well and I had a hard time breathing. And then I had a fever. And so everyone was convinced I had COVID
Oh my
and
God.
they tested me twice and I came back negative both times. But then still, I had a C section and while they were performing the C section, they all wore this protective gear as if I did have COVID.
Do you think they're doing
Um,
that for every birth or just because you had a fever?
I would be surprised if they were doing it for every
Mm.
birth. Um, yeah, and now because then it took me a long time, or it took me longer than usual to recuperate. Like I still had problems breathing after the birth,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're like, okay, well now your husband has to leave because you're going into this. I had to go into ICU.
Oh my God.
Yeah, which was crazy, and people were literally dying around me. And
Oh my God.
yeah, so my husband had to leave for that. But then in retrospect, they're like, yeah, it probably wasn't COVID. Maybe it was like pneumonia, but you also recovered pretty quickly. So they don't really know what happened to me,
Mm-hmm.
I guess. But I feel good now.
That's good.
Yeah.
Is so how long were you in the hospital total?
I was there a week.
Oh my God, that's so crazy. This is like I've thought of this. I heard this story about this guy in New York that was waiting on a heart transplant.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually has a Comedy Cellar affiliated podcast, and
Hmm.
he like for several years has been waiting for a heart transplant. Goes in, they finally gets to the top of the list. He goes in, they test him in the heart for COVID, no COVID for either of them. He gets the transplant, it's successful, and then 7 days later he tests positive.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, it's like what a historically unfortunate time to have to be in the hospital for. I mean, both you guys. Obviously, it sounds like he's going to be all right, also. But I mean, what a historically stressful, because that's such a I can speak for my side of a complication free delivery,
Mm-hmm.
which is that it is the most stressful thing I've ever experienced in my entire life,
Mm-hmm.
without the added stress of all of this going on.
Yeah, it was the worst week of my life. I thought I was gonna die.
Oh my God, that's so crazy
Yeah.
to put on top of. And your child is okay. Your baby's okay.
Yeah, the baby, he's good. I mean, he's early, so he is gonna be in the NICU for another month,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a month and a half. But the doctors aren't worried, and he's gaining weight and looks good. So he's just premature at this
So
point.
and the NICU is like remains in the hospital in like a chamber. Is that the
I mean, it's pretty sequestered, yeah. So he is in the hospital, and I can go visit him every day. But my husband, I mean, it's just pretty shitty, I think, to have a baby in the NICU regardless,
mm-hmm.
because you expect to have the baby and take the baby home, and now I have to go visit the baby, and my husband's only one of us can go each day.
Mm.
And my husband has been the one that's like going to the grocery store for us. And so he's more at risk for COVID. And so I've been the one going in to see the baby. So that's hard that we're not, that he's not able to see the baby. And also, I have to like breast pump every 3 hours. And that's such a nightmare. I don't know if um your partner or your wife
Yeah,
did breast pumping.
she breastfed for about a month and a half
Mm-hmm.
and was pumping, and by the way, I'm like couldn't admire her more for this decision. She's like, this is killing me.
Yeah.
And so then
Oh,
we just
I've only been doing it a week and a half, and I'm like, ready for this to be over.
yeah, I mean, far be it from me to give a new mom any advice. Trust me that I understand my opinion is not desired on this at all. But the we actually got really great advice from the pediatrician. She said, like, you know, first off, this really great Freakonomics podcast came out right before we had our daughter that talked about the outcomes of breastfed children versus formula fed children
Formula.
are like
Mm-hmm.
basically the same, but it's really good for the moms. The outcomes for the moms are different if they breastfeed.
Hmm.
Like a reduced risk of breast cancer in the data, and I think like reduced risk of postpartum depression and all that stuff. Whatever. I'm again. I'm only looking at it from the data side. But my wife was like really struggling, and the pediatrician was like, "Listen, this is the only like this is supposed to be for good. If it's not doing good, stop doing it."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Yeah, that's thank you," because she's not
That's
going to
very
trust.
reasonable.
Yeah, she shouldn't trust my opinion. My wife, I mean, we listened to that podcast together, but she shouldn't trust my opinion on breastfeeding.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's it seems miserable. It's a very difficult time, I think, for
Yeah.
everybody. And then, are
Very
you working?
taxing.
Did you say in our messages that you're working already?
I did work, so I was working for a TV show, and their scheduling I mean, everything's been wonky because of this.
Yeah.
So like we went on hiatus, but then they brought us back for a couple weeks. And so our last week was this past week.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, I probably shouldn't work, but I also would love the money,
Mm-hmm.
and I really do enjoy the work.
Yeah.
And it's our last week, and the baby's in the NICU, so it's not like I'm feeding him every 3 hours. Like I'm
Right.
pumping every 3 hours, which I can do and still sit on my computer. So yeah, I did work this past week, but now that job's over.
I see. Is that's got to be just incredibly distracting to have this baby in the NIC unit while you're trying to do all the other things in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that work's over, I think it'll be nice, because then I'm just like, okay, I'm pumping, I'm eating, I'll go see the baby, I'll take a nap. It simplifies things.
Mm-hmm. Is
Uh,
how's your husband doing with? Because I mean, again, like I just can't even imagine uh, this like what should be like a joyous occasion, and now you get to see your child through like pictures on a phone.
yeah. I mean, it's really hard for him. Um, and he was really wonderful throughout the whole experience. And even when he had to go home from the hospital, he was like calling the doctors a lot to make sure that our son and I were both doing okay. But it was like the most stressful week for him too. Even though he had no physical pain,
Mm-hmm.
it was still scary.
I think when I followed you on Instagram, maybe your most recent picture was you high five, like pregnant, and high
Uh-huh.
fiving an audience member.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Have you looked back on that picture and thought about how irresponsible that looks like today? Obviously, like I said, I was hugging people at shows. I was shaking audience member hands like no, the Sunday before. I'm not judging you, but have you looked at
Uh-huh.
that picture since then?
No, I haven't thought of it in that light. I think the last show I did was actually at a synagogue, and oh, I can't remember the guys. The headliner came in like wearing a mask or gloves or something.
Oh, wow.
And I just remember thinking, well, this wackadoo, you know? I was like, if you're so concerned, stay at home. But you know, what is freakish to me is the people that are still not wearing masks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's strange. I mean, we're like pretty I've I think I've left our property, which we have a very small we have a house on a very 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 small lot. Uh and I've left our property maybe 3 times, one to walk my dog. And we live on like in a busy area, and it's completely dead, but I still see most of the people not wearing masks. I have not seen I've seen a lot of people reporting like large groups congregating at the park or whatever,
Hmm.
and I haven't even made it to the park to like I haven't driven by a park, or even I drove one time and I felt like I forgot how to drive.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen any of that, but I'm yeah, I agree. I think it's so like you were around obviously during like do you even remember when the swine flu happened, like it impacting your life in any way?
I was in college and I remember the cafeteria got really weird
Hmm.
and because they were like really trying to mitigate like the cereal you press down on the cereal
Mm-hmm.
in those big tubes. I remember everything was weird because they're trying to mitigate touching things as
Right.
much as possible. But that is really all I remember about it.
Yeah, so like I guess the I think of what I was like cuz I would have been 2009, I would have been 23. Was it 2009? And
Mm.
I was like stupid. I would have for sure been the guy that doubted it and thought that so like I try to be slightly empathetic to those people because they are stupid, but I guess we just all were stupid at some point.
Yeah.
Or at least
Also,
me and them were all stupid at some point.
yeah, like, but we were, in your 20s. I'm like, I see families out without masks on, and I'm
Yeah.
like, shut the fuck up, read the news, you know, don't be an idiot.
Yeah, I'm even like I am a little bit empathetic to this idea that we've just like had our personal liberties ripped from us, but I don't think this is the time, like personally this isn't the time for me to be like I wouldn't protest anything. I mean I probably wouldn't protest anything in my life anyway, but
Mm,
uh like the I think we're doing the right thing for this right now. I think there's the data
mm-hmm,
suggests that it's better in places where people are doing where like there's more strict regulations and whatever.
mm-hmm, yeah,
You did a joke that got you fired from your teaching job,
correct.
which is I have to tell you has been my nightmare since I started comedy. I'm like very selective about the people that I work with who I let know that I do comedy. I've
Uh-huh.
like don't put a lot of videos up, and I've recently started to get like a little less worried about that. And then I read that on your I read that today, and then I saw it in your on your lights out appearance, and it like reinvigorate like there were multiple times reading what you were writing and the jokes that you were telling where it like gave me like chills at how much I had worried about the exact thing that you went through.
Uh-huh.
Can you like what I don't know, I guess were you worried about that at all before it happened?
Yeah, I've been worried for years, but that's because I never wanted anyone at this school to know that I did stand up.
Yeah.
However, I got hired at the school because one of the women who worked in admin was a comedian who recommended me.
Oh, okay.
So they knew she did comedy. They knew that she knew me through comedy. So right off the bat, there were a few faculty who knew I did comedy.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of my fellow teachers told some students my first
Oh my
year.
god.
And so even though it's been in the air ever
Mm-hmm.
since, I was there 5 years and I was very, and at that point when the kids found out, I like privatized my Instagram. I took all my videos down. I like made it so that it would have been impossible for me to get in trouble, even with the knowledge that I do stand up. But then, yeah, the reason I got fired is because the Colbert Booker wanted to see a tape, and usually I made all my videos unlisted, but for some reason I was just like, oh, I want to make sure that this is like, if they want to send this to someone, that there's no problems with them accessing this video. I was just like so excited at the prospect of Colbert that I didn't really think it through. Yeah. And that is the video that was found.
That's it's so infuriating because it's like all of the, it really like neuters. So for the same reason, I've like I won't say my wife or daughter's name on podcasts. I had it I don't know, like 5 years ago. I did a podcast and it slipped, and then a guy that listened to our podcast like put like it. I didn't even slip like that much, maybe a first name, and he was like, he friended her and then started like interacting with her on Facebook. A guy that listened to our podcast.
Okay.
And it like thoroughly validated this thing where it's like, I'm not going to say my daughter's name. I'm not going to say my mom's name, my sister's name, my wife's name, like my dad's name. Nobody's name is going to be, because it's like, I don't want, my wife works for a school. My mom works for a school district also. And then also like, I'm going to post, part of being a comedian is like, not everyone's going to, it's like saying inappropriate things sometimes.
Yeah.
And so, I don't want my wife to have to answer for like a joke that I tell. That would suck.
Yeah, for sure.
And especially at the like the early stages of comedy, like you're very vulnerable because you need your day job to continue to be able to continue to do comedy almost,
100%.
Like obviously if you're a full-time comic and you have a fan base that already likes you because of this, who gives a shit who comes across this clip? But yeah, I that's man, what was it, what did it feel like when did you feel betrayed by the school, or did you feel like it was pretty justified? How true is that joke, by the way?
I don't even remember what joke I told.
It was a joke about a bat mitzvah.
Oh, that one, the factuality of that very few of my jokes are actually real. I mean, I was a teacher. I usually, like, there's a kernel of truth and then I fictionalize. So like, there were kids in a different class who did jack off in a bathroom at a bar mitzvah. They weren't my students. I never talked to them about it. Right. No teachers were even at this bar mitzvah. Like, so, and that wasn't even the joke that I got fired for. It was a different joke, but again, one that I made up. So, on one hand, so I got fired because a dad saw my stand-up and was offended and reported me to the principal. I did feel betrayed because he didn't know me, and it wasn't a dad of one of my students.
Oh,
and
really?
Yeah, he had kids in different classes, and so I was like, if you knew me, you would know that this is like, even if you knew me a little bit, you would know that I love my students. What I'm doing on stage is definitely a character. And he accused me of punching down because I was like making fun of these fictitious students. And I was like, you're a powerful, like D-list, I guess he's a D-list celebrity. He's an actor. And like, you got offended and then you ruined my life. Like, I feel like that's a little bit punching down.
Yeah.
Because what am I supposed to do from that point on? Um, so, but also it was a private school and the administration is like beholden to the parents. The parents
Pay
pay this
tuition.
exorbitant tuition.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy was like the PTA president. And so I don't know if admin wanted to fire me, but they had to fire me.
Yeah, oh man, that's unfortunate. I I think it's so weird that we live in a time where the idea that you're doing a character on stage, like every comic to some degree is doing a character on stage.
Yeah.
Nobody's as like night after night is actually as mad about anything, or I mean, maybe in the worst case scenario, thinks that like they're laughing at their own jokes on stage. Like that's all. Everybody's doing some form of acting on stage, and oh my god, that's so. I wish that you. I assume you don't say who it is.
I did on a podcast the other day. I don't
Oh
know
really?
if I should. Yeah.
Well, I don't want to get. I don't want to get you in any more trouble
Yeah.
than.
Um, he's not that famous, but he's famous enough.
I would love to know after the podcast. I won't say
Sure,
if that's
sure.
possible.
I'll text you.
All right. Do you think that has? You'll never be like a full-time teacher again?
I really hope I don't have to be a full-time teacher again.
Right.
Not that I don't like teaching. I really love teaching. And I also, in the back of my mind, I'm like, right now is crazy because of COVID, but also I'm very aware of climate change and I don't know how that's going to impact the world. And Los Angeles and New York are like hubs of comedy and they're on the coasts. And if they shut down, what will happen to stand up? So I'm not even positive that stand-up comedy is going to exist as a viable option for a career in 20 years.
Sure.
So, I am grateful that I have a teaching background. I hope that I would be able to go back to teaching if I had to. But right now, yeah, I'm pursuing writing and comedy as much as I can while I can.
Would you have been able to pursue writing in the same way if you had not been fired from that job?
I mean, it's hard to say. Like that whole year, the getting fired, I got fired February 28th of 2019. And from that, and during the year after was when I got Lights Out, and through that Lights Out video is how the guys running my writing job found me. So, and then I talk about getting fired on the Lights Out set. So it all kind of seems connected. I don't know if none of it would have happened if I hadn't gotten fired, but I do think there might be some connection. And yeah, this writing job that I just finished, it was full time, so I wouldn't have been able to teach and write. I would have had to quit anyways.
Right.
So maybe it is all for the best. Who knows?
Yeah. Have you done any of that math in your head? Like, it seems to me, and I'm a person that did not. Well, actually, that's not true. I did lose a job under very different circumstances, COVID-related circumstances, which is much better. Did you get to collect unemployment?
I did collect unemployment. Yes.
Isn't that pretty great?
It is nice. I mean, it keeps you afloat. But I was like, if I didn't have my husband and I was just like paying rent on my own, I would have been screwed. Yeah. So it's something, but I'm like, we need to get more.
Yeah, and is it a union writing job?
No, it's non-union.
Oh, okay. I don't know how much non-union writing jobs know. I know when I saw the what union writers make, I was like, I got to put a fucking packet together. Like this is crazy. Way better than teaching.
Jobs, I assume. Yeah. I mean, I don't, especially where I'm at, being newly in the game of writing, it's, I'm guessing, unreliable, but I think once you can get job after job, they do pay very well. while they last.
Um, did you ever finish your young adult novel?
I did. I finished a draft of it. I've actually, my plan for before the baby was born was to turn it into a feature script.
Mm.
So I might still try to bang out an outline of that before he comes home from the hospital.
So you would in lieu of a novel, or in addition to the novel?
Well, right now I just don't have any connections in like the literary world,
Mm-hmm.
but I do have some connections for film and television. So I
Right.
was just thinking it might be better to try to make it into a feature script.
And then I have this question. I know you were raised religious,
Mm-hmm.
and you're a. Did it cut out? Can you still hear me?
It did.
Okay.
So you said I was raised religious,
Oh yeah,
and
sorry. So you were raised religious, and now you're like a modern person living in LA, with a child. How do you plan on, uh, do you plan on imparting religion onto your child at all?
great cue. I don't really want to go to church ever again. I think it's pretty boring. My husband was going to Quaker meetings for a while, which
Mm-hmm.
I could potentially get more on board with. Um, it will be weird. Christianity was such a part of my childhood and adolescence. It's hard for me to imagine my son having a childhood and adolescence that is completely void of religion.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I don't believe it's really true. So why would I put that on him? I think that religion is so helpful in giving concrete guidelines of morality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that might be more difficult for my husband and I to do without God's looming presence.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm hopeful that through, just our example and conversation, we'll be able to instill morality in him, without the fear of hell,
Are your
which is
parents?
what really did it for me.
All right. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Jesus, that was the whole cord fell out. So are your parents religious?
They are very Christian.
How do
Yes.
they feel about your life? Do they have any uh, judgment and or influence on your life at this point?
I don't think they really have much influence. They wish I were Christian. They wish
Mm-hmm.
we went to church, but I don't think they really love the content of my stand up. They're always saying like, you should write clean jokes, and I'm like, you write a clean joke and I'll tell it. I don't If a clean joke came to me, I would happily tell a clean joke.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I think that if they could choose, certainly they would choose different things for me, but they do love me and they're happy that I'm happy. Um, yeah, they're not like dying to come to all my stand-up shows or whatever, but that's fine.
Yeah. My parents are they're like I call them culturally Christian, but like without any we never went to church growing up.
Hmm.
I've been into a church like 4 times, and one was for like summer camp, 2 weddings, and a funeral, and maybe like a Sunday school in there. There's like no regular church attendance. I was atheist at a very young age, to the point that like I kind of get annoyed with atheists now, because they're like it's just so like it becomes self-righteous. Like they just find a new religion,
Mm.
politics or sports or whatever, and become
Hmm.
very self-righteous. And And then like I'm 33 and I think about the friends that I'm closest with now in my life that aren't comics, and they're all like, if not Christian, they're like boring couples with children who are leading like my life resembles my Christian friends' lives
Mm.
much more than like my friends that are outspoken atheists. And I wonder like, do you, so what I'm getting at is I'm still going to do like Santa Claus. We're still going to celebrate Christmas. We're going to celebrate Easter, but like my wife isn't religious either.
Uh,
So, are you going to do any of that stuff, or is that stuff? Do you think that's like the negative part of religion?
Another great question. Because this Christmas, was I pregnant this Christmas? I
I think
can't
so.
remember the
You would have been
timeline of
right.
events. I was pregnant this Christmas, yes. Oh, Lord.
I feel I don't know if you can hear
Father.
me constantly qualifying that I feel bad as a man saying this, but I can say with confidence that you were pregnant on
I was
Christmas.
pregnant on Christmas.
Yeah.
I remember talking to my husband and being like, yeah, I don't want our kids to believe that Jesus is the Son of God and they have to devote their lives to him to go to heaven.
Hmm.
I also don't know if I wanted them to believe in Santa Claus, and like be moved by materialism and consumerism. Um, and I was like, but I do want a tree. Is it weird to just have a tree with no presents? And my husband's like, I don't know if we can do that to our kids.
Yeah, I've we've celebrated Festivus for like the last 4 years. Um, not as like a real. I mean, I kind of do believe if you ever are you actually I shouldn't take for granted. Are you a Seinfeld person? Not a Seinfeld person?
I've seen a few apps, but I wouldn't
Oh
say I'm a
wow.
Seinfeld person.
So Festivus is a holiday that was popularized by Seinfeld, but it existed before Seinfeld, and it's basically like anti-materialism, uh, all of the stuff about Christmas that is kind of objectively bad removed from the holidays. So I kind of do believe in that, but it's also like a fun, like I guess what would they call that? Like a secular holiday to not have any of the like pageantry that maybe is connected to stuff that I don't believe in.
Mm-hmm.
I actually had a Jehovah's Witness friend that had this really because Jehovah's Witnesses are like very the like. Actually, I shouldn't even speak for Jehovah's Witnesses. I just know they don't celebrate holidays or birthdays or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
and he was like, I was like, so does it feel weird that we get all this time off for Christmas and you don't celebrate Christmas? Does that like feel shitty to you? And I did say shitty too. Very cool Jehovah's Witness. And
Mm-hmm.
he's like, everybody's off. Like my whole family's off, so we end up getting together anyway.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's like the perfect way to do holidays. Is like just have like do all the stuff without any of the annoying shit. Like just take the good stuff and not have any of the bad stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I still want to like have a tree and bake cookies and um I like the music, even if the stuff that has Santa Claus and Jesus in it. I
Hmm.
still love that. But I'm like, yeah, will our kid hate us if we don't get him presents?
Oh yeah,
That's
I
the
feel like you got to do
question.
the presents.
You gotta see. I just,
You think the
I'm
presents are the worst
also,
part?
I think I hate presents. I just feel like if our kid wants something, wouldn't we have gotten it before for him? Or like, wouldn't he have worked
Yeah.
for it? And I'm just like, also, it comes from such a place of privilege to be able to get your kids presents. And
Hmm.
I don't like kids comparing gifts afterwards, but I know that if our kid was like, yeah, I got nothing because my parents don't believe in this, uh, is gonna probably be worse. And then my husband and I were like, maybe we should just like do a trip instead. But I'm like, I don't know if a kid is gonna connect like, we're gonna go to the Grand Canyon instead of getting an Xbox. I don't know if that's gonna work.
Yeah, it's very. I don't know. I want. That's a good. I feel like I'm never gonna get any of this past my wife. Like she would veto that, but I do think what you're saying is I agree with you that I think there's like a type of gift that's like, especially for kids, where it's like this is like a measuring stick, and then there's like real good gifts. And my ambition, and this might be a little lofty for like a very young child, but is to have like the meaning of gift giving still present and not the measuring part of it. Do you know what I mean?
Mm,
Because
yeah.
I hate receiving like I don't care how many gifts I get ever, but like
Hmm.
when someone really knocks it out of the park with like a thoughtful gift,
Hmm.
it means everything, right? It makes you feel so good as the recipient.
Yeah, this is true. I can see, like, I remember my parents got me a guitar one year, and that was something I really wanted and something that I used, and it was a skill I developed. So I'm not opposed to like useful gifts, like a bike, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to ever give my kid gifts for the sake of giving them gifts, or like gifts that will not go truly used,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is easy to do.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think there's like a weird like American extravagance thing of seeing a lot of gifts under the tree too.
Yeah.
Cause like my mother in law, and I hope she doesn't listen to this, but we'll go to her house for or their my in laws' house for Christmas, and she's got like a stocking for us, and it's got like some good stuff in it, and then also it feels like some stuff that might as well just be styrofoam, but it's in the form of like a TJ Maxx bargain bin gift.
Sure.
And it's like, yeah, I mean, how many like I don't need a uh like a small sized tube of toothpaste. That's a
Yes.
very personal decision what toothpaste you use, right? Like I don't.
That's also true.
Yeah, I think I'm a big craft beer guy. And my mother in law will give me craft beer, and it's like it's oftentimes a swing and a miss. And the reason is because I'm like an annoying snob about beer. But I feel
Mm,
like everybody's an annoying snob about their toothpaste or their soap or their shampoo or the underwear that they wear or whatever. Like these things that, like, I feel like we should get rid of the stockings completely.
yeah. Anything, but also, because then you get into territory where you're like, oh, well, I'll just tell people what I want. But it's like, then just get it your fucking self.
Right. And I'm generally pro gift card, but I think there's something silly about giving like oh, you gave me a $200 gift card and I only gave you $100 gift card. So like, does that mean that you're more generous than I am? That you it becomes like a very like bald uh uh measurement of generosity that I don't think I really like. My dad and I used to do this silly thing when we were on worse terms, which is we would for our birthdays we'd basically just like give each like we'd end up just like giving each other the same $50 gift back and forth. And it's like it's a net zero, and we both stress out about this. We're only doing this because like other people feel like my sister wants us to have a better relationship, or my mom wants us to have a better relationship. And it's like, why don't we just go do something fun then? Like, why don't we just go to a bar and talk or something, buy each other dinner instead of like spend time instead of money and stress on this went into a direction that I didn't expect the podcast to go, to be honest with you.
Well, I'm very passionate. I mean, I just don't like gift giving
Mm-hmm.
unless I mean, I love to cook for people. I
Mm.
love to bake for people. And if they have like a task that needs to be done, I'm happy to do those things. But like my parents aren't really big gift givers. Like I don't think they really got us presents for our birthdays growing up. They would like say you can choose where we go to dinner and you can pick what kind of cake mom makes, and that was it. And so I think the the language the love language of gift giving has just not been instilled in me.
Mm-hmm.
Um and hopefully my son will learn to accept that.
I mean, ultimately, I think the your no matter what your love language was, your kid's probably going to rebel against it to some degree, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, And then I guess one last question before I let you go back to your life, and thank you for giving me some of your time during a very stressful time in your life. I now understand why you had time to do the podcast, by the way.
Yeah.
Um, the did you have any inclination to attempt to record like an album or a special at the end of your pregnancy? That's become very trendy recently.
Yeah, my husband and I were joking about how we should record the special in the delivery room because like that has not been done before.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I also I was just beginning, I feel like, to build good jokes about my pregnancy when when everything happened. So I feel like I would need to have another kid in order to really have a good half hour, 45 minutes on it. But no, I did not feel compelled to use my pregnancy as reason for an album or whatnot.
Do you think you're going to have another kid?
I mean, it was such a harrowing experience in the hospital that I was like, I'm never doing this again. Sorry, bud, you're going to be an only child. But there are 6 kids in my family, and I really love having siblings. I loved having a big family, and I honestly don't want to be the only one that hangs out with my kid. I want him to have other people so he's not bothering me to hang out with him. I was working on this as a bit too, like how only children have like really good vocabularies because they're just hanging out with their parents, and how I want my kid to talk like a normal kid. Yeah. So I think we will try to have at least one more kid.
Oh, cool.
What about you guys?
I don't know. I think like if you would have asked me 2 years ago, I would have been like, I mean, 2 is the max. There's no way we're having more than 2.
Yeah.
I think if you'd asked me 2 years ago, I would have been a little more on board. There's a couple things that I'm worried about. One is like we could provide such a better life or such a good life for our daughter if our life trajectory keeps going as it is. One kid we can provide for very well, and 2 kids obviously are much more expensive.
Sure.
And then it's like, God, I mean, I don't know if I could really, like, if I'm doing comedy on the road, I don't know if I can realistically ask my wife to, like, be the, half the time single parent to 2 children.
Sure.
So my wife is working, and I got laid off because of COVID, and I've really, not that I didn't appreciate it before, but, like, the amount of work that being, like, a parent-only stay-at-home parent is just like, it's monumental.
Oh yeah.
So like I having 2 would just seems like unfair to ask of her. And then the other thing I was worried about is I just don't want to. I want to make sure that we're not trying to have another kid so that I can have a boy. And I really like. I'm not gonna say that like at no point was I ever like a boy would be cool. But my daughter is so great that I don't think at this point I have no like, it's so great right now that I have like I am completely satisfied as a parent right now, I would say.
That's good.
Yeah, and it's like the perfect time. I don't know, I'm going to try to not write like a bunch of COVID jokes because I think everybody's going to have them. But the one joke that I do want to tell is that I think we picked like the perfect time, or this happened for us at a perfect time because our daughter was like from 0 to 6 months, they're just a blob. And then from 6 months to 12 months, or 6 months to 8 months is where we're at right now, they're very fun, but they don't talk yet. Which is great because I don't want to hear that lady's voice for a while. So yeah, so I don't know. I think it would be max 2, and then I'm also like, I'm 33 and my wife is 31. And so you start to think about like, I'm gonna be like 50. I don't know, late 50s when this kid graduates college. If we have another kid, so we would want to do it like soon, and then I can't imagine. I've seen a lot of these like memes going around about like a baby boom happening after this. And first off, I don't think it's gonna happen because like we leaned really hard on like the doctors and nurses to give us information while my wife was pregnant. I like went to every appointment and took notes, and like that whole system seems like it's going to be completely overrun also because so many resources are being allocated to like other segments of the medical system. I don't know how interchangeable nurses and doctors are, but it seems like they're going to be throwing all of the resources at COVID for a long time. And also just like going to the hospital seems like such a risky place to go right now that I don't think it, and two, I feel like if we got pregnant right now, I'd be very stressed out about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a great time.
Yeah. And then 1918 is the only year in the history of the United States. This is just a fact I keep telling people. Every year in the history of the United States since 1900, the population has increased by at least 700,000. Most years it's over 1 million. And in 1918, the population reduced by 60,000.
Wow.
So like I don't think that's in human psychology, and it seems very scary right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't have I mean, I do want to have a second child, provided that things balance back out.
Yeah.
But yeah,
You think
mostly for him.
in LA, you think you'll stay in LA when you have a second kid?
If I can keep getting writing jobs, yes.